So I first want to introduce our moderator, Clark Anderson. And many of you know Clark, and he's going to moderate a couple of the panels yet today. Clark is the Executive Director of Community Builders, an organization dedicated to shaping healthy, equitable, prosperous communities in the American West. And he has a vision of creating livable communities for all. And the last 20 years, Clark has been dedicated to helping communities advance innovative solutions. We're lucky to have him here, and he has brought really this remarkable panel. This is truly a regional conversation of leaders, and we're so grateful that you've been able to join us today. So take it over, Clark. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gail. Wow, so from these big, challenging, daunting dilemmas this morning into housing finance, that's a lot. Good job, everybody, for sticking with it. We've got a great panel today of county commissioners from up and down the valley, and so we really can take a regional look and understand some of the role of local government and local policy in shaping this issue. It's a really important thing because, well, actually, let's just sort of quickly take a look at the hands in the room. Raise your hand if you are a local government official. Get them up high. We want to be able to track you guys down later. So a small group, local governments, counties and municipalities have a huge role to play in this. Every day, every week, they're making decisions that are shaping our communities and economies, right? They are investing in infrastructure with their capital investments. They are making decisions around utilities. They are establishing land use plans and policies that really create the environment within which the private sector has to work. So it's a tremendously important role. And yet local governments are very different in the way that they approach these things. And that is how it should be, right? They represent different constituencies. And so part of what we're going to be trying to do today is tease that out a little bit. This is a problem that is regional in scope for us. I think we all understand in the room that the challenges we face in one part of the valley are connected to, but at the same time different from problems and challenges in another part of the region, right? While Rifle is affected by decisions that are made in upper parts of the valley, for example, the market in Rifle is not the same as the market in Basalt or in Aspen. And so we need policy responses and political leadership that is responsive to those realities. So this is a great opportunity to hear from 3 county commissioners on that front. Starting from left to right, we have Kathy Chandler Henry from Eagle County and Tom Jankovsky from Garfield County and Kelly McNicholas, sorry, I got that wrong. Yeah, I did get it right. Kelly McNicholas Kury from Pitkin County. So thank you, guys. So want to begin by understanding what we're doing now and sort of how each of you views the challenge. I know we spent some time talking challenge this morning, so we're not going to drag you too far through that, but I asked these guys to think about how they view the role of local government in this problem as a way of also entering into talking about what it is that they are doing as a local government now. And part of that, it is helpful to sort of speak to some of the key challenges. So I want each of you guys to just take a moment to talk to us about how you view the role of local government, what you are doing, some of the most important things you're doing in your jurisdictions now. And again, feel free to sort of set that up by talking a little bit about what some of the key challenges you're trying to tackle are. And I think we're going in order. So Kelly, you get to go first.
All right, well, let me welcome you all to Pitkin County. Thank you for making this snowy travel up here, and of course, Aspen and to Habitat for hosting this. I can't help but keep Jimmy Carter kind of in my thoughts for this legacy that we're all connected by today. But, you know, I just wanted to talk a little bit. We heard from our folks in APSHA that we have about 3,400 units in our inventory of ownership and rentals here in the Upper Valley in Pitkin and Aspen, who have developed that over time. Now, in 1970, Pitkin County had 4,400 jobs. In 2020, we have 23,000 jobs. So somewhere along that interval of time, that 3,400 units might have been right at a good sweet spot for us. But we know now more and more that that is not the case, and that our demand continues to grow, and that wage earners at every level are really struggling to find housing here. We know that we have pinch points in the system, which I think actually counties are really poised well to address. We know that we have 3,400 units that need inventory, that need maintenance over time. We know that some of those have expiring deed restrictions. We know that we need transitional housing that our inventory doesn't address for our seasonal workforce. And for counties in particular, we know that we also have homelessness problems and senior housing demands that I actually think we're in a really great place to address, because we do provide human services and we do provide senior services. And so, different from how our municipalities have addressed this and funded workforce housing in the past, I actually think that the counties can take some stress off the system by providing senior housing options for people who are aging out of the workforce, as well as providing homelessness solutions for our unhoused population who we know work. Regionalism is a really incredibly timely topic for us to be having right now, because some of the funding solutions that we have heard talked about today require regional approaches, and we have to move quickly. So Rick Garcia talked about money from 1304. 50% of that money is dedicated to rural resort and rural areas of the state. We got to spend it by 2026 or it goes back to the pot. We know that the governor is making announcements today about land use policy changes that are going to affect our rural resort region and make us work together regionally. They're going to do a statewide housing assessment and tell us how many units we're short, and then they're going to tell us that we have to work together to come up with that solution. So this conversation couldn't be more timely, and I'm happy to go in more details, but I don't want to take more time than my intro should allow.
That's a perfect intro. Thanks, Kelly. Tom?
Okay, thanks, Clark. You know, I kind of look back at the last decade, 2010 to 2020, and in Garfield County, we had one subdivision or PUD come through us for land use, and that never got off the table. And then what happened during the pandemic? I mean, I think you all have kind of saw that, but my wife's a realtor, and she had 10 lots in a subdivision between Glenwood Springs and Carbondale, and for 4 years, none of those sold. In fact, she'd go to an open house and go, "Oh, this is," and then all of a sudden, 2021, all 10 of them sold in 3 months, and half of them have houses on them now. But so housing is always, and affordable housing has always been an issue for all of us, but it's become a crisis right now. And some of the things we're doing is that for subdivisions, PUDs, 1 in 10 units have to be affordable housing. We allow minor subdivisions up to 3 lots as a use, not a use by right, but administrative use. You don't have to go through the Board of County Commissioners or Planning and Zoning. We allow ADUs up to 1,000 square feet as a use by right. Our HUD funding that we get, it's about $3 million every year. We transfer that over to CHAFA, and they use that for down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. We help fund Garfield County Housing Authority, who takes care of our HUD vouchers, and also they oversee our affordable housing units in unincorporated Garfield County. We have funded Habitat for Humanity for their Wapiti Commons project, and I imagine we will probably help fund again the Glenwood Springs projects that are out there as well. Transportation, you know, it's a big issue in our county because we have people that are commuting all the way into Aspen, and RAFTA ends in Newcastle, so Garfield County funds, along with RAFTA, the hogback between Newcastle and Rifle. Then we fund the PATS, which is Parachute Area Transportation System. We fund that as well. We do have a private sector modular home manufacturing company in Rifle. They use rolled steel digital construction. They have 16 units that have been approved in Rifle, so they're going to manufacture them. They're going to put them in the ground. They're going to sell them all this year. There's 60 names out there for those units. We are updating our building code and trying to look at that as far as affordable housing. We're going to go to 180% of AMI. We are going to allow use by right for businesses to build up to 4 employee housing units. Then we're also looking at our just looking at more density for affordable housing, and we're also looking at how can we reduce some of our fees for affordable housing. Then just we are a diverse county. I'll say that, and people from Parachute to Carbondale, and just to show some of that diversity. In 2022, a single-family home in Parachute sold for $382,000. Parachute, Battlement Mesa, and I thank you, Sherry, for talking about Battlement Mesa, because I think there's a lot of people that don't know about Battlement Mesa. And in Carbondale, a single-family home in 2022 sold for $1.8 million, and so and that's with that's with 134 homes sold in Carbondale. So that I'll great.
Thanks, Tom. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us here today, and thanks to Habitat for Humanity. This is a great event, and I love it that the title is Solving the Housing Crisis, because I do think that we can solve it. There's a lot of brain power, a lot of political will, a lot of financing options now that maybe weren't there in the past. So I'm excited about this. Clark, you asked about sort of what are some of the barriers that we see, and I did bring one slide. And if we can get that up there. To me, a huge barrier is how do we think about affordable housing in our communities, and how do we talk about affordable housing in our communities? And it's it's the avocado toast problem. It's people say housing's always been a problem in resort communities. That's true. People say, I lived in a closet for 3 years. You said you saved your money for 3 years. If I can do it, they could do it. I heard a local mayor last week said, I get distressed when I talk to young people. They're complaining about housing, and I find that they had just gone out to dinner. What this chart shows, the bottom line, is wages. This is just since 2006. You can go back to 1990. It looks very same. It looks very flat. Wages have gone up. I think the 2006 is about 39,000. 2021 or 22 that it goes up to is 55,000. This is actual W-2 wages. So it's not AMI, it's not federal poverty level, it's not any of those manufactured numbers. That's actually how much a W-2 wage earner in Eagle County earned during those years. In Eagle County, average wage earners earn $250 a week less than the statewide average. That's the entire state, Eastern Plains, San Luis Valley, everywhere. $250 a week less, and we know what housing costs are. That's the top line. And if you go back to 1990 or so, I think one of the last speakers talked about this really kind of started catching up to us in 1990. In 1999, there was a gap. It was about this big. It was, I can live in a closet for a year big, and you could make it up. You could get a loan from Uncle Fred or something. You could do it. Now, if you look in 2022 at that gap, you can go without eating out. You can go without eating the rest of your life, and you can't do it. So I think we need to start thinking about housing a little differently. And even though some of those folks, like the mayor I mentioned, they agree there's an affordable housing problem. They're trying to do something about it. But in the back of their minds, they sort of think, if they worked at it like I did, they'd be able to get into a house. I don't think that's the case. The other kind of philosophical piece out there is starting to think about housing as shelter rather than housing as an investment. And we really feel this in our resort communities. We've got second homeowners, third homeowners. Federal tax policy promotes that. It promotes having those deductions, having those houses that sit vacant. In the meantime, we have workers who need shelter. They need shelter for their families. They need shelter to be a part of our community. And thinking about it in that way, I think is a little bit different. And maybe that would help get us past this statement that you also hear whenever there's a land use file. I am really in favor of affordable housing, but not here. You know, maybe maybe in .0, maybe in Quebec, not here. We need affordable housing, but not here. So I think just sort of that mind shift of you really can't do it as a family on your own anymore unless you happen to be a trust fund or some other fortunate circumstance that you're in. And the idea that housing is shelter, housing is our community, and that's what, one of Habitat's sayings that I love. I'm on the Habitat board on the other side of the county, and is that housing builds hope, and hope builds community. So that's kind of where I wanted to land.
Well, that's great. Thank you for those introductions. And I think you can see, a real recognition across the region of the importance of the issue. And I think, Kathy, the way that you spoke to it there in terms of some of the political challenges is something I want to get to in a minute. But first, again, sort of in the interest of sort of thinking about solutions, I really liked Sherry's comments earlier today about sort of failure is not an option. I think that's true. We have to have that mentality. I also think when we look at the gap between where we are and we need to be, we also have to acknowledge that at the same time, failure is also probably the most likely outcome under the circumstances and sort of the system we have now. And so we do have to Kathy's point, sort of think about what we need to do differently and rethinking how we're approaching the problem. So I want to ask each of you guys, what should we be doing? Where do you see the best opportunities for progress moving forward? Again, thinking specifically about the role that local government can take. And we can either go in order. If one of you guys is excited and knows what you want to say, you can jump right in. Go for it.
All right. As the host county, I'll be the first to go. And I will just say, we heard to be brave, bold, and brilliant. You have to be less brave when you have so much support here, right? And I actually hope that to be the case as we pursue some of these solutions that we're all talking about. I'm really glad to be able to sit up here and say that my board, the Pickens County BOCC, at our retreat this year has agreed to explore the pursuit of a dedicated housing revenue source, which we do not currently have. We collect monies through our mitigation fee program, which a lot of communities have built into their land use code. So when a developer generates additional employees, they have to pay a fee to cover housing for those. We've done work on that. We've increased those fees so that developers are paying their full way, but it's not enough. We still have a gap to close, and this has reached such a crisis point that our board is excited to find dedicated revenues for that. We don't know what that's going to look like yet, but what we have committed to is for it to fund the spectrum of housing solutions, kind of that I've talked about, again, because counties are better poised to look at homelessness solutions through senior housing, to innovate along how we deliver housing in our communities. So one of the programs that we do internally for our staff is an equity program where both us as employer and our employees buy into a home. We do a 40% match. There is a cap on how much that can appreciate to the employee, but they can make money, and the county can make money, and the county does take risk if the market should go down. That's been a real success because everyone is gaining and winning, and we're putting monies back into that fund whenever an employee moves on in their career, and we make a sale of that. That is something that I think the private sector should really work with us and talk with us about how that program is working, because it is something where I think that there could be a community equity component and an employer equity component that comes together. And we, one of the things for Pickens County that's important to us is, as equal as we hear about housing being a crisis, a priority is protecting rural character. So we want to do housing right. So that's where the bold, brave, and brilliant comes in. Be brilliant about it. Do it right. Use good land use to do it. And we're thinking about that in terms of partnering with our municipalities on their really thoughtful housing plans that they already have on the books, but can't currently fund to the fullest extent, right? I mean, our municipalities can do one project at a time. If the county can create a dedicated revenue source, we can help them accelerate that. So those are some of the solutions that Pickens County is exploring and pursuing currently.
Yeah, I think that we are in a housing crisis right now. I think in a decade we still will be we'll have a housing issue, but it's not going to be a crisis. I think we will build our way out of this, and it's through all the different sectors. The private sector has to, if there's money to be made, they will step forward and participate. When I look at us as far as a county, so, these land use issues are really contentious. I mean, and they're going to get more contentious. And there's a lot of pressure, not in my backyard. Yeah, we need housing and those types of things. And as an elected official, I think all the elected officials in this office know that you're in this room, know that it takes some guts sometimes to stand up for what you believe and what's right, as opposed to when you've got 100 people in front of you that are angry, and it's not easy. So private sector for sure will be part of this, and then public-private partnerships, and then public nonprofit partnerships as well are all this working together what are going to get us out of this situation. But there are people out there that will work on this, and we'll get out of it, but it's going to take a little while.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, those rooms full of people are a challenge, that's for sure. So Clark, you asked about role of local government. I think it's sort of setting the stage and doing what we can to make it easier for these housing projects to go through. So some of the things that we've done in Eagle County are work with all of our municipalities on a housing inventory and a land inventory. So we know where those tracts of land are, or where those little places or those big places are, and who might be able to start taking a look at that. Transit is huge. We just passed a valley-wide transit authority on the Eagle River Valley side, and of course there's RAPTA over here. Those things are really critical to being able to create housing around where transit is available. Water's a huge one, and of course everyone is really, it's top of mind about the water crisis, even though thankfully we're getting some more water this winter. But even simple things like the Root Eye Water and Power Authority over here is working with all the municipalities and the counties to create a watering schedule that is consistent from place to place, because it's hard to know where exactly you live in the Roaring Fork Valley. So if everybody knows the watering schedule and it's all the same, that's going to help save water. That's going to help with affordable housing. And open space is another one that I wanted to mention. I think it is our responsibility to protect some open spaces so that we can have density. Town of Eagle is looking at a very dense project, Hay Meadow at Brush Creek. The county recently purchased 1,800 acres on the edge of that. It's a little easier to live in multifamily dense projects if you can walk out your back door and get to Brush Creek and go fishing or go take a hike. So sort of setting the landscape is good, I think. The zoning, that's come up several times today. In order to change zoning, at least in Eagle County's regs, you have to prove a public benefit. The biggest need on every single survey in every single place in the Western Colorado is housing. So in our minds in Eagle County, that public benefit you have to prove for anything you want to do is housing, because that's mostly what we need. Some of the other things, land trust, I would encourage anybody who's interested in land banking, land trust, to talk to Kim Williams. That's really a passion of hers. And then this is sort of a maybe crazy idea, but this idea of a funding stream, and Commissioner Jankovsky talked about the role of the private sector. We don't have a good funding stream for housing. And if you think back in the oil and gas days, there was severance taxes that built town halls, that built rec centers, that built main streets. It tried to account for the impacts that industry was having. Our industry is outdoor recreation, it's tourism. We don't have a funding stream to deal with the impacts from that private sector business. We're trying to nibble around the corner a little bit with lodging taxes that can now be used for housing. But just thinking about tourism, outdoor recreation as an extractive industry, and how does that pay for impacts is a wild idea.
Thank you. Okay, so you guys covered some great territory there. I want to dig in on a few different pieces of it. Let's just dig in a little bit on you guys each brought up some of the land use policy questions. Some of the polling earlier was speaking to, we had questions around, should we be able to enable density inside the municipalities and make it so there's housing closer to jobs and transit and, good things like that I think all of us in the room recognize are, as a practical matter, really important parts of addressing this problem and having a more balanced housing market, not just a more balanced and affordable housing market, one that is actually shapes quality communities. But that stuff's pretty hard, right? And you guys are in where the hats you have of having to stand down those moments in those meetings and try to make a difficult decision. So I want to sort of look at this in two parts. The first part, we just want to sort of dig a little deeper on the policy environment itself and sort of the things we should be doing in terms of land use policy and where there's some specific opportunities for improvement there. And then we're going to I recognize it's not fair to ask you that without acknowledging the political realities. So, take a second to sort of, we'll hit the policy environment first, and then leave some space for talking about the political realities of actually doing that, because I think that's a really important one. So, to begin with, and we can change the order a little bit. Kathy, you can start. Just talk a little bit more specifically about the things that counties and municipalities, local governments in general, need to be doing better on the policy front, and you've covered some of it, so go ahead.
All right, thanks. I think that we really need to be doing a better job of getting in on the front end of things. The way land use usually works is that a developer or someone starts working on a project. They may have worked on it for 2 years, 3 years by the time it gets to the Board of County Commissioners. Gets there and we say, hey, there's not enough affordable housing. And they say, we've been spending millions and working on this project. We've met your guidelines. What the heck? So if there is a way to rethink about how do we get involved in projects early on, and it's tough because we sit as a quasi-judicial body. We cannot weigh in on a project before it's done. But I can see Eagle County purchased 10 acres of land in West Eagle. So now we are acting as a developer, and having that control early on makes it much easier to get those pieces that you want, the net zero, the affordable housing. So if there's a way, a policy way that local governments can be part owner or a partner in a project, on the front end, I think it'll save everybody, developers, everybody a lot of money. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. It'll save some community heartache too, because the community will get to be involved before it suddenly shows up and it looks like a pasture is going to be full of houses. And that is always a startling change to have to come to terms with.
So getting some of those things set up on the front end, but then of course, needing to follow through with the political will once it's there, which is, of course, challenging. Okay, great. Tom.
Okay, the first thing I'd say is to our state legislators and to the governor, and that is, don't come back with statewide codes that are going to affect, because this is an urban legislature, an urban governor, and they have no idea what rural Colorado has to go through as far as housing. So stay out of our land use codes and let us make those decisions. Next thing is, I represent unincorporated Garfield County, and so everything outside the municipalities, but most of the growth in our county is inside the municipalities, and so there's, you can say things in Garfield County need to happen in the municipalities as well as at the county level. And then finally, I talked a little bit about it, but we to be as flexible as we can be. We are government, so we're not real flexible, but we're local government, and respond to the needs of our citizens. And some of that I talked about, code changes, more density maybe for affordable housing, and giving businesses more opportunity to provide employee housing for their employees, and I'll talk about this is going to be off the subject, but we've got a heck of a gap in the middle where people can't find housing. I mean, that gap is, I mean, it's serious. I'll use my family members again, a son-in-law and daughter who are looking for housing between Glenwood Springs and Carbondale, and they can go up to $1 million, between $1 million and $2 million, and they can't find, there's not inventory out there for them for their needs. My son-in-law has special needs. He needs a big garage. But we've got to also address that issue, you know, for those professionals that are engineers and doctors and firefighters and police people and don't fit into the affordable housing, but it's workforce housing, and that's another issue that's in front of us.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you. So, you know, I think Pitkin County, maybe differently from Eagle and Garfield a bit, is a little unique because most of our land use in an unincorporated county is single-family residential. And, you know, there has been a strong tradition and commitment towards putting dense housing in the urban growth boundaries. And, you know, we continue to think that that's important to do because we're also really keeping in mind what our climate action goals are, which for us is really the eminent question of the day. We have a current process going on in our community that is looking at how our land use code links with our climate action goals. And the story there really is a story of density, because you can look at the amount of greenhouse gas equivalent that's produced in unincorporated county is the same as the total of our municipalities, and that is for much, much less density. And so that conversation is taking place to really look at, you know, how can we can't continue this sort of land use pattern if we're going to reach our climate goals, and what type of building and what use of our remaining unbuilt parcels would we like to see in the county. So we're waiting for those recommendations to come back, but you know, the big question for us related to our land use in unincorporated county is, what are we facilitating there? And that is, you know, really an economy and really a land use that is continuing to generate demand on the affordable housing market. And it's a real problem that I believe that we have to face, because when 25% of our jobs are focused on an industry that is more and more dispersed in residential construction out in unincorporated county, then those people can't rely on transit to get to their jobs. And what kind of quality of life does that create? What kind of climate impact does that create? And what kind of generation on affordable housing does that create? And so, you know, for us, it's not just looking at our land use code. This is one of my wildly aspirational goals, which I think is going to be our last question, but would really be that we look at how do we diversify our economy in a way that can align our economy with our affordable housing and our climate goals. Because right now, we're not doing it intentionally. You know, we're not doing it, I think, thoughtfully. It's happening to us instead of happening because of our policies. And that, I think, is a real reckoning that we have to have. We don't have an economic, you know, we don't have any kind of economic development policies in the county. We don't have an arm of economic development that would help us diversify our economy. You know, we just supported a grant for CORE, which is, you know, the net zero organization in our valley, to figure out a green workforce. Those are the type of things that I think we have to do in alignment with updates to our land use code, so we're not just generating more employees that don't have a place to live, because that's what's happening right now in Pitkin County.
You heard it here, folks. There is good alignment, actually, on a lot of these things. You know, it's just to reflect back on some of these things. You know, each of you guys spoke to elements of proactivity and the need to try to be more proactive and less reactive, and also the importance of collaborating with and really recognizing that ultimately it makes more sense for most of the growth within the region and within each county to take place within the municipalities, shaping the policies that make that possible and enabling the coordination and collaboration on doing that is probably its own panel we'll set up next month. But, you know, that's really helpful to hear some of that alignment. And then also, Kelly, I think you just said some really important things that we probably don't have time to fully dig into, but this idea of, you know, how do we think about the limited land use availability we have and shape a market that is more conducive to supporting a local community when that is out of sync with the market that we have, and what types of policies. Sometimes we think about land use policy very much in the space of dimensional standards and zoning and uses, but there's an element too around how do we want to use that remaining land capacity that we have, and who do we want to house in the remaining land we have for housing. And so really important question. So then, just briefly on this one about the kind of political side of it, because there's only so much we can say, but I'd like for each of you just to sort of speak to the challenge of doing these things within the political environment that we have. Each of you faces that, and it's not the case that if you go to different parts of the region, you don't face pushback. Rifle right now has been facing a lot of pushback on some of the would-be workforce housing in their community. So if you guys can each just take a kind of a brief moment to speak to this so we have time for the last question, that'd be great.
Briefly, I think one of what I thought was a brilliant comment at a land use hearing once was talking about affordable housing and saying, here's what it looks like, and it looked pretty dense, and it said, but these people are your neighbors. Once they move in, they're your babysitters, they're going to be looking after your dog, they're going to become your friends. So helping make that transition, I think the political will comes from all the neighbors in the community, and sort of making that mind shift, I think that's critical. One other piece on the policy part of it, I think, has to do with these federal numbers, the area median income, the federal poverty level. They just don't work in resort communities, and you all probably know where I am on that, and we won't dig into it here, but it's really hard to base your housing policy around either AMI or federal policy level, because AMI looks higher than what people make. Federal policy level, poverty level is way too low. And the last thing I want to say is just this trying to keep a hold of our values and what's important to us here, and you guys have both mentioned that. People came here for the rural character, for the mountains, for the wildlife, for getting to be outdoors in a little solitude. We need that, and we need workforce housing. So how do we take the housing that we have, make it workforce, and fit more in if we need it?
Okay, I diverge a little bit. Garfield County is 60,000 people. By 2040, according to the state demographer, it's going to be 100,000 people. That may not be correct, but if we still continue at our 10% growth rate, we'll be at least at 80,000 people by 2040. And we're very diverse, as I mentioned. If you compare Parachute and Battlement to Carbondale or Glenwood, they're very different. And so they're very different needs. They're very different cultures. So if you compare, it's comparing Aspen to Glenwood, or Carbondale to Aspen or Silt. I mean, they're all different communities, and they all have different needs, and we need to honor that. I think that's very important. I think we've talked about regionalism, and that's some of the problems with regionalism. So how do we work together regionally? We do have some good examples. We have RAFTA. I hope that RAFTA gets all the way out to Parachute in the next decade, because that'll help our budget. We also work really well together in human services, and I'll say that Up Valley lack of housing is our human service crisis. There's no doubt. We have latchkey kids. We have parents that are out for an 8-hour day. They're out for 12 hours. It affects our judicial system. I mean, it's housing, but it's a lot bigger than housing. And so, people, and then the final thing I want to say is for Garfield County, we want more jobs in the Colorado River Basin, so we're not shipping our employees an hour each direction. It's 90 miles from here to Battlement Mesa or Parachute, and people are making that commute.
I'll pick up where you left off, actually, because I think one of the things that I say to people when, again, there's this real tension between housing growth, rural character that I frankly think we've done a good job balancing, and I have continued faith that we will do a good job balancing. But, when folks say, well, we can't house everybody, and, you're just going to create this monster of demand. And I'm like, these people, whenever you hear that word, these people, it's always a red flag for me. But these people, they already live here. Or they're already coming here. We have 11,000 commuters every day into Aspen. They are already in our community. They are your coworkers. They are the coaches for your kids' teams. They are sitting on the boards of the nonprofits in our valley. They are already here. It's just, do we want a better quality of life for them and for everyone who moves along our roads and for our mountains and environment? That's what I think the question has to be when we have this conversation. And then I also look to just, the ways that our community has supported things in the past. 70% of Pickens County's voters supported Prop 123. And frankly, that is a bad funding bill for Pickens County. We're probably not going to see a lot of that money, honestly, but, there is the support there. There is support for community-driven development. So I think there are commitments towards, well, let's have community-serving development. There is broad support for those. And so that's the political will that I rely on that has been demonstrated to me from our communities.
That was awesome. Thank you guys so much.